Plastic Room, a true horror story. I sat across from a serial killer and drank his tea. For 20 minutes, I smiled politely, nodded at his questions, and ignored every instinct screaming at me to run. You know what the scariest part was? It was not the plastic-wrapped room I discovered later. It was not the tools laid out like a surgeon's tray. The scariest part was that I dismissed every warning sign because I did not want to seem rude, because I was taught to be polite, because I convinced myself I was overreacting. This is the story of how I almost became victim number 6. And the only reason I'm alive to tell you this is because I finally listened to the voice in my head that said, "Run." My name is Rachel Bennett. In the fall of 2015, I was 24 years old with a marketing degree I could not figure out how to use and a chip on my shoulder the size of Texas. I had bounced between jobs since graduation, never lasting more than a few months at any of them. Barista at a coffee chain downtown, administrative assistant at a law firm that smelled like old paper and broken dreams, retail associate at a department store where the fluorescent lights made everyone look slightly dead. It was not that I was lazy or incompetent. I just had a problem with authority, with being told what to do by people I did not respect, with swallowing my opinions and playing nice for a paycheck that barely covered my rent. My mother called it a character flaw. My father, before he stopped calling altogether, said I had inherited his stubborn streak. My best friend Lindsay just laughed and said I needed to find a job where I could be my own boss. That is how I ended up in house sitting. Lindsay had been doing it for about a year when she first mentioned it to me. We were at her apartment, splitting a bottle of cheap wine and complaining about our lives, when she started talking about her latest gig. Some wealthy couple in Shaker Heights had paid her $300 to spend a week in their lakefront home feeding their cat and watering their plants. She made it sound like a vacation with a paycheck attached. "Seriously, Rachel, you would be perfect for this," she said, refilling my glass. "You get to stay in these amazing houses, play with cute pets, and no one tells you what to do. It is basically getting paid to exist." I was skeptical at first. It sounded too good to be true, and in my experience, things that sounded too good to be true usually involved a catch. But Lindsay walked me through the process. She worked for an agency called Home Watch that connected house sitters with clients. They handled the vetting, the contracts, the insurance. All she had to do was show up, follow the instructions, and collect her fee. "The agency takes 40%, she admitted when I asked about the money. "But it is worth it for the security. They do background checks on all the clients, and if anything goes wrong, you have got backup." 40%. I turned that number over in my mind like a stone I could not stop touching. 40% of everything I earned going to some faceless company for what? For making phone calls? For running background checks I could probably do myself with a Google search? The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a scam. Like another middleman taking a cut of my labor while I did all the actual work. I did 2 jobs through Home Watch before I made my decision. The first was an apartment in Cleveland, watching a lazy cat named Whiskers while the owners toured Europe. The second was a house in the suburbs with 2 golden retrievers and a fish tank that needed daily maintenance. Both went smoothly. Both paid well even after the agency took their cut. And both convinced me that I could do this on my own. "You are making a mistake," Lindsay said when I told her my plan. We were on the phone and I could hear the worry threading through her voice like a warning bell I chose to ignore. "The agency is not just about the money, Rachel. They protect you. They make sure the people you are working for are legitimate." "I can protect myself," I said, already drafting my Craigslist ad in my head. "I am not stupid. I know how to read people." Famous last words. I posted my ad on a Tuesday evening. Independent house sitter, experienced and reliable. Flexible schedule, reasonable rates. I included my phone number and a professional-sounding email address I had created specifically for this venture. Then I sat back and waited for the offers to roll in. They did not. For 2 weeks I got nothing but spam and a few half-hearted inquiries that never went anywhere. Someone wanted to know if I would also clean their gutters. Someone else asked if I was willing to house sit for free in exchange for the experience. I started to wonder if Lindsay had been right, if I had made a mistake cutting ties with the agency. Then on day 16, my phone rang. "Hello, is this Rachel Bennett?" The voice on the other end was warm and measured, with just a hint of a Midwest accent that felt immediately familiar, like someone's grandfather or a kindly neighbor offering to help you carry groceries. "Yes, this is Rachel. My name is Warren Mitchell. I saw your advertisement online, the one about house-sitting services. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." I sat up straighter on my couch, suddenly alert. "No, not at all. How can I help you?" Warren explained his situation in that same calm, unhurried voice. He and his wife owned a house out in the country about 3 hours southeast of Cleveland near Vinton County. Beautiful property, he said, 4 acres of land, very peaceful and quiet. They needed to travel to New York for a business conference 3 nights away, and they were worried about leaving their dog alone. "His name is Buster," Warren said, and I could hear the affection in his voice. "Golden retriever, friendliest dog you will ever meet. We just cannot stand the thought of leaving him at a kennel. He gets so anxious around other animals." It sounded perfect. A nice older couple, a friendly dog, a quiet country house. I asked about the details, the dates, the compensation. Warren answered every question patiently and thoroughly. Yes, they would provide all the dog food and supplies. Yes, the house had Wi-Fi and cable. Yes, he would pay in cash $200 for the 3 nights, plus they would leave the refrigerator stocked. "I know it is a bit remote out there," he added almost apologetically. "The last mile or so is a gravel road, and cell service can be spotty, but the house itself is very comfortable. My wife and I moved there 2 years ago, and we have loved every minute of it." I should have asked more questions. I should have asked for references, for the address of his employer, for some way to verify that Warren Mitchell was who he said he was. But his voice was so reasonable, so trustworthy. And more than that, he was my first real client. My proof that I could do this on my own without the agency, without anyone taking their 40% cut of my hard work. "That sounds wonderful," I heard myself say. "When would you like me to come see the property?" We arranged to meet that Saturday. Warren gave me the address and detailed directions, warning me that GPS could be unreliable in that area. He suggested I arrive around 10 in the morning so we would have plenty of time to go over everything before they left on Monday. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, staring at the address I had scribbled on a notepad. 3 hours away. Remote property. Spotty cell service. The words should have been red flags waving in my face. Instead, I saw them as adventure, as proof that I was brave and independent and capable of handling anything. I called my mother that night to tell her about the job. She listened quietly while I explained the details, and when I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Rachel, honey, are you sure about this? Going out to some stranger's house in the middle of nowhere?" "Mom, he is not a stranger. He is a client. And it is not the middle of nowhere. It is Vinton County. People live there." I know. I just worry about you." Another pause. "At least take that pepper spray I gave you. The one from Christmas." I glanced at the canister sitting on my bookshelf, still in its packaging. "Sure, Mom. I will bring it." I did not bring it. Saturday morning came gray and cold, with low clouds threatening rain that never quite arrived. I woke early, showered, and dressed in what I thought of as my professional but approachable outfit: dark jeans, a burgundy sweater, and comfortable flats. I wanted to look capable without seeming intimidating. Someone you could trust with your home and your dog. My bag was already packed with the essentials: wallet, phone, portable charger, a notebook for taking notes about the house and Buster's routine. At the last minute, I grabbed a granola bar from the kitchen just in case. Then I locked my apartment door and headed down to where my car was parked on the street. The drive took just over 3 hours, exactly as Warren had said. The first 2 hours were familiar territory, highways and exits I had driven dozens of times before, but after I turned off the main road, the landscape began to change. Strip malls and gas stations gave way to farmland. then to dense forests that pressed close against the road like they were trying to reclaim it. The sky grew darker under the canopy of trees even though it was barely past noon. I followed Warren's directions, carefully turning off the paved county road onto a gravel lane that wound deeper into the woods. The car bounced and rattled over the uneven surface, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the leather. The trees were so thick now that I could not see more than a few feet into the forest on either side. Anything could be hiding in that darkness, anyone. My phone showed one bar of signal, then none at all. Just relax, I told myself. It is just the country. People live like this all the time, nothing to worry about. The GPS had lost its connection miles ago, but Warren's directions were precise enough that I did not need it. Turn left at the old oak tree with the split trunk. Follow the road for another half-mile. When you see the mailbox with the faded American flag, you are there. I saw the mailbox, I saw the driveway. And as I turned onto the property, I saw the house. It was larger than I had expected, a 2-story structure painted white, though the paint had faded to a dingy gray in places. The roof was brown shingled, relatively new-looking compared to the rest of the building. The front yard was spacious and neatly maintained, the grass trimmed short and even, but there were no flowers, no shrubs, no decorative touches of any kind. Just grass and the house and the wall of trees surrounding everything like a cage. 2 vehicles sat in the gravel driveway, a silver sedan that looked at least 10 years old, and a dark blue pickup truck with mud splattered on the wheel wells. I pulled up behind them and turned off my engine, suddenly aware of how quiet everything was. No birds singing, no wind rustling the leaves, just silence, thick and heavy as a held breath. I grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. The air hit me immediately, cold and damp, carrying the smell of dead leaves and wet earth. I stood there for a moment, looking at the house, at the dark windows that reflected nothing back. Every cell in my body was telling me something was wrong, that this place was wrong, that I should get back in my car and drive away and never look back. But I did not, because I had an appointment. Because Warren was expecting me, because turning around now would mean admitting that maybe I was not as capable as I thought, that maybe I needed the agency after all, that maybe my mother and Lindsay had been right to worry. I walked up to the front door and raised my hand to knock. The door swung open before my knuckles could touch the wood. Warren Mitchell stood in the doorway, smiling at me. He looked exactly like his voice had suggested, somewhere in his 50s, with graying hair combed neatly to one side and a face that belonged on a community church bulletin board. Trustworthy, fatherly, safe. He was dressed impeccably, a crisp blue button-down shirt tucked into pressed khaki slacks, a leather belt with a polished silver buckle. He looked like a man who cared about appearances, who took pride in presenting himself well to the world. But then I looked down. His shoes were old sneakers, the kind you would wear to mow the lawn or clean out the garage. They were filthy, caked with dried mud or something darker, the laces frayed and gray with age. The contrast with the rest of his outfit was so jarring that I could not look away. It was like seeing a beautiful painting with a corner torn off a wrongness that your brain could not quite process. "Miss Bennett," Warren said, extending his hand. "So glad you could make it. I hope the drive was not too difficult." I shook his hand. His grip was firm and warm, his palm dry. Completely normal. "No, your directions were perfect," I heard myself say. "Beautiful property you have here." The words came out automatically, the polite responses of someone raised to always be courteous, to never make a scene, to assume the best in people until proven otherwise. Meanwhile, a small voice in the back of my mind was screaming about the shoes. Why would a man who ironed his shirt and polished his belt buckle walk around in those disgusting sneakers? Why would he not change them before meeting a stranger at his front door? Maybe he was doing yard work earlier, I told myself. Maybe he does not care about shoes. Not everyone is perfect about everything. I found reasons. I made excuses. I silenced that screaming voice because listening to it would have been inconvenient. Warren stepped aside and gestured for me to enter. "Please come in. I will give you the grand tour." I crossed the threshold into the house. The door closed behind me with a soft click. And just like that, I was inside. Inside the trap I did not know was a trap. Inside the story that would follow me for the rest of my life. Standing in the entryway of a house that felt less like a home and more like a stage set, a carefully constructed illusion designed to make people like me feel safe. That was my first mistake, but I was about to make so many more. The interior of Warren Mitchell's house was immaculate. Not clean in the way that people's homes are clean when they are expecting company, with the clutter hastily shoved into closets and the surfaces given a quick wipe down. This was something else entirely. This was sterile, clinical, like walking into a furniture showroom where everything existed solely to be looked at, never touched, never used, never lived in. The entryway opened into a living room that could have been photographed for a real estate listing. A brown leather sofa positioned precisely in the center, facing a flat-screen television mounted on the wall. A glass coffee table without a single fingerprint or water ring marring its surface. Hardwood floors that gleamed under the pale light filtering through the curtained windows, not a scuff mark or scratch anywhere. The smell hit me next. Cleaning products, sharp and chemical, layered over something else I could not quite identify. Bleach, maybe, or industrial disinfectant. The kind of smell you would expect in a hospital waiting room, not someone's home. It was strong enough to make my eyes water, slightly strong enough that I had to resist the urge to cover my nose. "Please make yourself comfortable," Warren said, gesturing toward the sofa. "I will put some tea on. My wife should be down shortly. She's just getting dressed." I nodded and sat down on the edge of the leather cushion, my bag clutched in my lap like a shield. The leather was cold against my legs, even through my jeans. I looked around the room again, searching for something, anything that would tell me about the people who lived here. Family photographs on the walls, books on a shelf, a stack of mail on an end table, the accumulated debris of daily life that fills every occupied space. There was nothing. The walls were bare except for a single framed print of a generic landscape, the kind you would find in a hotel room. No bookshelves, no magazines. The end tables held matching lamps and nothing else. It was as if someone had furnished this room according to a checklist, ticking off each item without understanding that a home is more than the sum of its furniture. Warren disappeared through a doorway into what I assumed was the kitchen. I heard the sound of running water, the clink of ceramic. Normal sounds, domestic sounds. I told myself to relax. Some people were just neat. Some people did not like clutter. It did not mean anything. But my eyes kept moving, kept searching, kept looking for something that would make this place feel real. That is when I noticed what was missing. No dog toys, no chew bones scattered in corners. No tennis balls wedged under furniture, no food bowl by the wall, no water dish, no leash hanging by the door. Golden retrievers shed constantly, their fur getting everywhere, no matter how often you vacuum, but this room was spotless. Not a single strand of golden hair on the dark leather sofa. Not a nose print on the glass coffee table. Nothing. Maybe they keep the dog in another room, I thought. Maybe he stays outside most of the time. Maybe they are just really good at cleaning. The explanations came easily logical and reasonable. I was good at explaining things away. I had been doing it my whole life, rationalizing the behavior of people who did not deserve the benefit of the doubt, making excuses for situations that should have sent me running. It was a skill I had honed to perfection, and it was going to get me killed. Warren returned carrying a small tray with 2 cups of tea. He set it down on the coffee table and took a seat in an armchair across from me, crossing one leg over the other in a pose of casual relaxation. His dirty sneakers looked even more out of place against the pristine floor. "Sugar milk?" he asked, gesturing toward the cups. "No, thank you. Just plain is fine." He handed me one of the cups, and as I reached for it, I noticed his hands. his fingernails specifically. They were caked with something dark underneath, packed into the crescents of each nail like he had been digging in dirt, or something worse than dirt. The rest of him was so carefully put together, the pressed shirt and the combed hair and the polished belt buckle, but his fingernails were filthy. It made no sense. "If you were going to clean yourself up to meet someone, would you not wash your hands?" I took the cup and did not drink from it. "So," Warren said, settling back in his chair, "tell me about yourself, Rachel. How long have you been doing this house-sitting work?" "A few months," I said, my voice steady despite the growing unease in my chest. "I started with an agency, but I decided to go independent recently. More flexibility that way." "Independent, I like that." He smiled, and there was something in that smile that made my skin crawl, something that did not quite reach his eyes. A young woman who knows what she wants, who does not need anyone to hold her hand. I did not know how to respond to that, so I just nodded and glanced toward the doorway where he had said his wife would appear. "Is Mrs. Mitchell coming down soon? I would love to meet her before we continue." Warren's smile flickered just for a moment, so brief I almost missed it. "She is getting ready." "My wife takes her time with these things. You know how women can be." A small laugh meant to be conspiratorial. "She will be down shortly. In the meantime, why do I not show you around the house?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that I would prefer to wait for his wife, that I had questions I would rather ask both of them together. But the words would not come, because that would be rude, because I had been raised to go along, to be agreeable, to trust that adults knew what they were doing. So I set down my untouched tea and stood up. "That sounds great," I said. Warren led me through the living room into the kitchen. Like everything else in this house, it was spotlessly clean. White countertops without a single crumb. A stainless steel sink that gleamed like it had never been used. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner, the only sound in the oppressive silence. "Feel free to use anything in here during your stay," Warren said, opening a cabinet to reveal neatly arranged dishes and glasses. "We will leave the pantry stocked, of course, and there is a list of local delivery places on the counter if you prefer not to cook." I nodded, but my attention had drifted to the refrigerator. I walked over to it, trying to seem casual. "Mind if I take a look, just so I know what supplies I might need to pick up?" "Of course." I opened the door. The interior light clicked on illuminating shelves that were almost entirely empty. A carton of eggs, a gallon of milk, a bottle of water, a stick of butter still in its paper wrapper. Nothing else. No leftovers from last night's dinner. No vegetables in the crisper drawer. No condiments crowding the door shelves. It looked like the refrigerator of someone who had just moved in, not someone who had lived here for 2 years. "We eat out mostly," Warren said from behind me. "My wife does not enjoy cooking." I closed the refrigerator door. Of course, that makes sense. It did not make sense. None of this made sense. But I kept my face neutral, kept my voice steady, kept pretending that everything was fine, while the wrongness of this place pressed in on me from all sides. We moved on to the bathroom at the end of the hallway. Warren pushed open the door and stepped aside to let me look. "You're welcome to use this bathroom during your stay. There should be fresh towels in the cabinet." I looked inside. White tiles, white walls, white porcelain fixtures, clean enough to perform surgery in. But something was wrong here, too, something that took me a moment to identify. There was no shower curtain. The bathtub sat naked and exposed the chrome fixtures gleaming coldly. No bath mat on the floor. No toothbrush holder by the sink. No soap in the soap dish. No hand towel hanging from the rack. It was like looking at a bathroom that had been stripped of everything that made it functional, leaving only the bones. "Where do you and your wife usually—" I started to ask, then stopped myself. It was not my business. "We use the master bathroom upstairs," Warren said smoothly. "This one is just for guests." Guests. I wondered how many guests had stood where I was standing, looking at this empty bathroom, noticing the same things I was noticing. I wondered if any of them had listened to the voice telling them to leave. I wondered what happened to them when they did not. We walked back toward the living room, and I found my eyes drawn to the staircase leading to the second floor. The steps disappeared into shadow halfway up the upper landing, invisible from where I stood. No lights on up there, no sounds of movement. "The bedrooms are upstairs," Warren said, following my gaze. "But you will not need to go up there. The sofa pulls out into a bed very comfortable. My wife and I tested it ourselves when we first bought it." I stared at those stairs for a long moment, at the darkness waiting at the top. I could have sworn I saw something move up there, just a flicker of shadow at the edge of my vision. But when I blinked, it was gone. "Is there anyone else in the house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Besides you and your wife?" Warren's expression did not change. "Just us, and Buster, of course. Speaking of which, shall we go see him? He's been out back all morning." Out back. Right. The golden retriever I still had not seen any evidence of. The dog who supposedly lived in this house but had left no trace of his existence anywhere. I followed Warren through the kitchen to a door that led to the backyard. He opened it and stepped aside, letting me walk through first. The cold air hit me immediately, carrying the smell of dead leaves and damp earth. The backyard was larger than I had expected, a rectangular plot of grass surrounded by a wooden fence about 5 feet high. Beyond the fence, the forest loomed trees pressing close together like they were trying to look over each other's shoulders to see what was happening inside. The yard was empty. No dog, no doghouse, no food bowl or water dish or toys scattered in the grass, just empty space and the distant wall of trees and the heavy gray sky overhead. "That is strange," Warren said, his voice carrying that same calm, measured tone. "He should be right here. Let me check the doghouse." He walked toward the corner of the yard where a small wooden structure sat against the fence. I watched him crouch down and look inside, watched him make a show of being puzzled and concerned. "He must have gotten out somehow," Warren said, straightening up. "He does that sometimes, finds a gap in the fence and goes exploring. Do not worry, he always comes back." I looked at the fence. It was solid wood, no gaps visible, no places where a 70-pound golden retriever could squeeze through. I looked at the grass, searching for paw prints for the worn paths that dogs create when they patrol the same territory day after day. The grass was uniform and undisturbed, like no dog had ever set foot here. "There is no dog," the voice in my head said. "There was never a dog. This is all a lie. I should have listened. I should have turned around right then, walked back through the house, out the front door, gotten in my car and driven away without looking back. The evidence was right there in front of me, undeniable if I would just let myself see it. But I had invested too much in this. My pride, my independence, my need to prove that I could handle things on my own. Walking away now would mean admitting I was wrong, and I was not ready to do that. Not yet." "Maybe he will come back while we finish the tour," I said, and my voice sounded strange in my own ears. Thin and false. We went back inside. Warren closed the door behind us and I heard the lock click into place. Such a small sound, such an ordinary sound, but it sent a chill down my spine that I could not explain. We returned to the living room. I sat back down on the cold leather sofa. Warren took his place in the armchair across from me. The untouched tea sat between us on the glass table, slowly cooling. "So," Warren said, "shall we discuss the details of your stay?" I nodded, reaching into my bag for my notebook. Focus on the practical things I told myself. The schedule, the compensation, the emergency contacts. Get through this meeting and then decide what to do. "First," I said, pen poised over paper, "can you tell me more about your wife? I would like to meet her before I agree to anything." Warren's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. She's just taking a while to get ready. You know how it is. It has been almost half an hour." The words came out before I could stop them. I watched Warren's face, looking for a reaction, for a crack in the mask. His expression did not change. "She has not been feeling well lately. Some days it takes her longer to get moving. I'm sure she will be down soon. I wrote nothing in my notebook. Does she know I am here, that we had an appointment? Of course she knows. We discussed it last night. And she is definitely in the house right now. Warren leaned forward slightly, and something shifted in his eyes, something cold and flat, like a light being switched off. That is a lot of questions about my wife, Rachel. The way he said my name made my skin crawl, like he was tasting it, like it meant something to him that it should not. I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page, I said, forcing myself to hold his gaze. It is standard procedure, part of my process. Warren held my gaze for a long moment. The silence stretched between us thick and suffocating. Then his smile returned warm and friendly once again, and he sat back in his chair. Of course, I understand completely. You are being thorough. That is a good quality in a house-sitter. I tried to smile back. I'm not sure how successful I was. Let me ask you a few more questions, I said, turning to a fresh page in my notebook. How long have you and your wife lived here? 2 years, as I mentioned on the phone. And before that? A pause, very brief. We moved around quite a bit. My work kept us on the road. What kind of work do you do? Real estate mostly. Buying and selling land. Nothing exciting. And this trip to New York, it is for a business conference. That is right, a meeting with some potential partners. I wrote these answers down not because I believed them, but because writing gave me something to do with my hands. Something to focus on besides the growing certainty that I was sitting across from a man who had lied about everything. Do you have any references I could contact? I asked. Previous house-sitters who could vouch for you? Warren's eyes narrowed slightly. We have never used a house-sitter before. This is our first time. What about neighbors? Someone who could confirm that you live here, that this is your property? The smile was gone now. Warren's face had settled into something harder, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me want to shrink back into the sofa cushions. You ask a lot of questions, Miss Bennett. Not Rachel anymore, Miss Bennett. The shift in address felt deliberate, like he was putting distance between us, redefining our relationship from friendly to something else. I am just being careful, I said. A woman alone has to be careful. Warren stood up abruptly, and I flinched before I could stop myself. He noticed. I saw his eyes track the movement, saw something flicker across his face that might have been satisfaction. I think, he said slowly, that we have talked enough for now. Perhaps you should come back another time, when my wife is feeling better. This was my chance, my opportunity to leave, to walk out the door and never come back. He was giving me an exit, and all I had to do was take it. But something stubborn inside me refused. Some need to understand what was happening here, to prove to myself that I was not imagining things, that my instincts were not just paranoia. I would prefer to stay, I heard myself say. I have driven 3 hours to get here. I would like to at least meet your wife before I go. Warren looked at me for a long moment. Then he sat back down. All right, he said. We will wait. So we waited. The minutes crawled by, marked only by the ticking of a clock somewhere that I could not see. Neither of us spoke. I sat on the sofa with my notebook in my lap. Warren sat in his chair with his hands folded and his eyes never leaving my face. The silence was oppressive, heavy, filled with things neither of us was saying. I became aware of sounds I had not noticed before. The house settling, creaking and groaning like an old man trying to get comfortable. The wind outside, barely audible, whispering against the windows. And something else, something from upstairs. Footsteps, soft and slow, moving across the floor above our heads. I looked up at the ceiling, tracking the sound. It moved from one end of the house to the other, then stopped. Your wife, I asked. Warren did not look up. Probably. The footsteps started again, louder this time, moving toward the stairs. I heard the first step creak, then the second. Someone was coming down. My heart was pounding now, though I could not have said exactly why. This was what I had asked for, was it not? To meet Warren's wife, to confirm that she existed, that this was a normal house with normal people who just wanted someone to watch their dog. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. I heard them cross the entryway, approaching the living room. I held my breath. A man stepped into the doorway. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and thick arms that strained against the fabric of his black t-shirt. His head was shaved, his jaw square and heavy, his eyes small and dark and completely empty. He looked at me the way you might look at a piece of furniture with no more interest or emotion than he would give to a chair or a lamp. "Marcus," Warren said without turning round, "I thought you were going to stay upstairs." Marcus did not respond. His eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking. "This is my associate," Warren said, finally turning to look at me. "He has been helping me with some work around the property." I could not speak. My throat had closed up, my voice trapped somewhere in my chest. This was wrong. This was all wrong. There was no wife. There had never been a wife. There was only Warren and this silent giant and whatever they had planned for me. I stood up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, weak and unsteady. "I need to leave," I said. "Now." Warren stood up too, moving to block my path to the front door. "But we have not finished our conversation, Rachel. You had so many questions. Do you not want answers?" I took a step backward, bumping against the coffee table. The teacups rattled in their saucers. "Let me go." Warren shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "I'm afraid I cannot do that." He moved toward me and instinct took over. I grabbed my bag and ran not toward the front door where Warren was waiting, but toward the kitchen, toward the back door that I remembered was unlocked. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and fast, Marcus pursuing. And Warren's voice, calm and unhurried, calling out words that would haunt me for years to come. "Do not run, Rachel. It only makes things harder for everyone." I reached the kitchen. The back door was right there, just a few feet away. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, and threw myself through. The cold air hit me like a slap. I stumbled across the yard, heading for the fence. I could hear Marcus behind me closer now, his breathing loud in the silence. I reached the fence and grabbed the top rail, pulling myself up. A hand closed around my ankle. I screamed and kicked backward, feeling my foot connect with something solid. The grip loosened, and I tumbled over the fence, landing hard on the other side. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I did not stop. I scrambled to my feet and ran into the trees. Branches whipped at my face and arms. The ground was uneven, littered with roots and fallen logs that I stumbled over in my desperate flight. Behind me, I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, could hear Warren's voice calling my name. But I did not stop. I could not stop. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed for mercy. Ran until the sounds of pursuit faded behind me. Ran until I found the road, the gravel lane that had brought me here, and followed it back toward the main highway. I did not have my phone. It was in my bag, which I had dropped somewhere in my panic. All I had was myself, my body, my will to survive. I walked for what felt like hours. My feet ached, my shoulder throbbed where I had landed on it. Every sound made me jump, every shadow made me freeze, but I kept moving. Because stopping meant death. Because going back meant something worse than death. Eventually I reached the paved road. A truck came by and I flagged it down. The driver, an older man with a kind face and worried eyes, took one look at me and asked if I needed help. I broke down crying and could not stop. He drove me to the nearest police station. I told them everything. The house Warren Marcus, the empty rooms and the missing dog, and the way they had blocked my escape. The officers listened with expressions that shifted from skepticism to concern to something darker as my story went on. They sent a team to the house. Warren and Marcus were gone. But what they found in the master bedroom made the officers who entered it come out pale and shaking. The room had been wrapped in plastic. Ceiling, walls, floor, everything covered in thick sheets of contractor's plastic, sealed at the edges with silver duct tape. In the center of the room sat a wooden chair with ropes attached to its arms and legs. Beside the chair, arranged neatly on a plastic tarp, was a collection of tools, A hacksaw, a hunting knife, a hammer, a roll of duct tape, a bottle of bleach. The room was not designed for living, it was designed for killing, and for cleaning up afterward. I was supposed to be in that chair. I was supposed to be another victim, another body disposed of in the endless forest surrounding that house. The only reason I was not was because I had finally listened to the voice telling me to run. But even as I sat in the police station wrapped in a borrowed blanket and drinking coffee, I could not taste one thought kept circling in my mind. Warren had said I was the sixth person to beg him to let me go, which meant there had been 5 others before me, and none of them had escaped. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. I sat in a plastic chair in a room with fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered overhead, wrapped in a gray blanket that someone had draped over my shoulders at some point. I could not remember who. I could not remember much of anything clearly. The world had taken on a dreamlike quality, soft at the edges, like I was watching everything happen to someone else from very far away. A female officer named Deputy Morrison sat across from me, her face arranged in an expression of professional concern. She had kind eyes and a voice that reminded me of my mother, calm and steady, the kind of voice you use with frightened animals and traumatized victims. "Miss Bennett," she said gently. "Rachel, can you tell me again what happened from the beginning?" I had already told them, twice. But I understood why they needed to hear it again. They were looking for inconsistencies, for details I might have missed or misremembered. They were trying to build a picture of what had happened in that house, and I was the only witness they had. So I told them again. The phone call from Warren Mitchell. The drive to the remote property. The house that was too clean, too empty, too wrong. The missing dog. The wife who never appeared. The man named Marcus who came down the stairs instead. The moment when Warren's mask slipped and I saw what was underneath. Deputy Morrison wrote everything down in neat handwriting, nodding, occasionally asking clarifying questions when I stumbled over details. How tall was Marcus? What was he wearing? Did Warren have any distinguishing marks, scars, tattoos? What exactly did he say when he told me I could not leave? He said I was the sixth person to beg him to let me go, I said, and my voice cracked on the words. The sixth? That means there were 5 others, 5 women who sat where I sat and asked him to let them leave. Morrison's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me and I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that told me she understood exactly what that number meant. "We are going to find out what happened to them," she said. "I promise you that." The door opened, and another officer entered, a man in his 50s with a gray mustache and a face that looked like it had seen too much. He leaned down and whispered something in Morrison's ear. Her expression changed, becoming carefully neutral in a way that made my stomach clench. "What is it?" I asked. "What did they find?" Morrison hesitated. "Rachel, maybe you should get some rest. We can continue this tomorrow. Tell me. I need to know." She exchanged a look with the other officer, some silent communication passing between them. Then she sighed and turned back to me. "The team we sent to the house found some things," she said, slowly choosing her words with care, "in the master bedroom upstairs. I have already told you about the plastic sheeting and the tools, but there is more." I weighted my hands, gripping the blanket so tightly my knuckles had gone white. "There were photographs," Morrison continued, "hidden in a compartment behind the closet wall. Polaroids, dozens of them." She paused, and I watched her struggle with how much to tell me. "They appear to be trophies, mementos that he kept from previous encounters." Trophies. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and obscene. I thought about the women in those photographs, women like me who had answered an ad on Craigslist or responded to a friendly phone call, women who had driven out to that house in the middle of nowhere, trusting that the world was basically safe, that people were basically good. "How many?" I whispered. Morrison shook her head. "We are still processing the evidence, but based on what we have found so far, more than 5, possibly many more." More than 5, possibly many more. The room tilted sideways, and I had to grip the edge of my chair to keep from falling. All this time, Warren had been doing this, for years, maybe decades, luring women to that house with his warm voice and his friendly smile, trapping them in that plastic-wrapped room, doing things I could not let myself imagine. And no one had stopped him. No one had even known. "We also found something else," Morrison said, her voice even more careful now. "In the basement. There is a door that leads to a cellar. It was padlocked from the outside." I stared at her, not understanding. A cellar. We had to cut the lock to get in. The space was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Concrete walls, concrete floor. No windows. She paused. There were scratches on the walls, fingernail scratches. And in the corner we found remains, Rachel, human remains. We do not know how many yet. The forensics team is still working, but we believe some of them have been there for a very long time. The remains of women who never made it out. Women who had sat in that plastic-wrapped room tied to that chair and then been disposed of in a hole in the ground like garbage. Women whose families had probably spent years wondering what happened to them, whether they were alive or dead, whether they would ever come home. I barely made it to the trash can before I vomited. Morrison was beside me in an instant, holding my hair back, rubbing circles on my back while I emptied my stomach of everything I had eaten that day. When I was done, she handed me a cup of water and some tissues, her face full of sympathy that I did not want and could not accept. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not have told you all that. Not tonight. You have been through enough." I wiped my mouth and sat back in my chair, my body trembling with aftershocks. No. I needed to know. I needed to understand what I almost became. What I almost became. Another photograph in Warren's collection. Another pile of bones in his basement. Another missing person whose family would never get answers. "We are going to catch him," Morrison said, and there was steel in her voice now. "Him and his partner both. We have already put out an APB. Their photos are being distributed to every law enforcement agency in the state. They will not get far." I nodded, but I did not believe her. Warren was smart. Warren had been doing this for years without getting caught. He had fake identities, backup plans, places to hide. By now, he and Marcus could be hundreds of miles away, starting over with new names in a new state, already planning their next victim. "Is there someone we can call for you?" Morrison asked. "Family, a friend?" I thought about my mother, who had told me to bring the pepper spray, about Lindsay, who had warned me not to leave the agency, about all the people who had tried to protect me, who I had brushed off because I was too proud and too stubborn to listen. "My mother," I said. "Can you call my mother?" The next few hours passed in a blur. My mother arrived sometime after midnight, her face pale and streaked with tears, and held me like I was 5 years old again and had woken up from a nightmare. Except this nightmare was real, and I could not wake up from it no matter how hard I tried. The police took me to a hospital to be examined. I had not been physically harmed beyond some scrapes and bruises from my escape through the woods, but they wanted to document everything for the investigation. A nurse with gentle hands cleaned the cuts on my arms and face, while a doctor shone a light in my eyes and asked me questions about my mental state. "You are in shock," he told me, like I did not already know. "That is completely normal given what you have been through. We are going to give you something to help you sleep tonight. Tomorrow we will discuss options for counseling and support." I took the pills they gave me without argument. I did not want to be awake anymore. I did not want to think about Warren's empty eyes or Marcus's expressionless face or the scratches on the cellar walls. I wanted to disappear into blackness and not come back until the world made sense again. But even in my drugged sleep, the nightmares found me. I dreamed I was back in that house, sitting on the cold leather sofa, drinking tea that tasted like chemicals. Warren was across from me, smiling his warm smile, and when I tried to stand up, I found that my legs would not move. I looked down, and saw that they had been replaced with the legs of the wooden chair bolted to the floor. "Do not worry," Warren said in my dream. "It will all be over soon. The others did not suffer long. Well," he tilted his head, considering, "most of them did not." I woke up screaming at 4 in the morning. My mother was there holding my hand, telling me I was safe. I was okay, it was just a dream. But it was not just a dream. It was a memory that would never leave me, a shadow that would follow me for the rest of my life. The investigation continued for weeks. The forensics team worked to process the evidence from Warren's house. The FBI took over the case when they realized the scope of what they were dealing with. They identified Warren's real name through fingerprints found at the scene: Gerald Francis Whitmore. He had a record dating back to his 20s arrests for assault and attempted kidnapping that had resulted in plea deals and short sentences. He had learned from those early mistakes. He had gotten smarter, more careful, more methodical. The house in Vinton County had been purchased through a shell company 5 years earlier. Before that, Gerald had operated in other states, other rural areas where people kept to themselves and did not ask questions about their neighbors. The FBI believed there were more victims, more burial sites, more houses like the one I had escaped from. Marcus, they learned, was Marcus Dean Holt, a drifter with a history of mental illness and violence who had fallen under Gerald's influence sometime in the past decade. He was not a mastermind. He was a follower, a tool, a weapon that Gerald pointed at his victims when charm alone was not enough. 6 months after my escape, the active investigation was quietly downgraded. The tips had dried up. The leads had gone nowhere. Gerald Francis Whitmore and Marcus Dean Holt had vanished like smoke. I tried to go back to my normal life. I moved in with my mother for a while, then got my own apartment in a building with a doorman and security cameras and locks on every window. I started seeing a therapist twice a week, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Chen who specialized in trauma survivors and never made me feel crazy for checking the closets before I went to bed. I got a job at a nonprofit that helped victims of violent crime, answering phones and processing paperwork, and sometimes just sitting with people who needed someone to listen. It felt meaningful in a way my old jobs never had. Like I was taking the worst thing that had ever happened to me and turning it into something useful. But I never forgot. Not for a single day. Every time I saw a man in his 50s with gray hair and a friendly smile, my heart would stop. Every time I heard footsteps behind me on a quiet street, I would start to run before I could think about what I was doing. Every time someone knocked on my door unexpectedly, I would stand frozen in my hallway, unable to move, unable to breathe, until I could convince myself that it was just the mailman or a neighbor or anyone other than him. The 5th anniversary of my escape fell on a Saturday. I was living alone by then in a small apartment with a cat named Mochi, who slept on my pillow and purred when I could not sleep. I had built something like a life, even if it was a life permanently marked by what had happened to me. I spent that Saturday the way I spent most Saturdays, running errands and doing laundry and trying not to think too much about the date. But when evening came and I was alone with nothing to distract me, the memories came flooding back. I sat on my couch with Mochi in my lap, staring at the wall, letting myself feel it all. The terror, the grief, the survivor's guilt that never quite went away. I had learned in therapy that trying to suppress these feelings only made them stronger, that the only way through was through. So I sat there and felt them, and when the tears came, I let them fall. I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed with a notification, a news alert, the kind I had set up years ago to track any mention of Gerald's name or the case. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone and looked at the screen. The headline made my blood run cold. FBI confirms Ohio House of Horrors killer still active. New victims discovered in West Virginia. Gerald was alive. Gerald was still killing. And he had been doing it less than 200 miles from where I now lived. I did not sleep for 3 days after that news alert. When I finally crashed from exhaustion, I dreamed of the plastic room, of the chair with the ropes, of Gerald standing over me smiling his warm smile telling me that running had only delayed the inevitable. I made a decision then. Sitting in my apartment with the news article still glowing on my phone screen, I decided that I was done being afraid, done hiding, done waiting for Gerald to come and finish me or disappear forever or whatever fate had in store for him. I was going to tell my story. To every woman who might see a Craigslist ad for an easy job, to every person who might ignore their instincts because they did not want to be rude, to every potential victim who might not know that monsters like Gerald existed until it was too late. I started writing that night. The words came slowly at first, painfully, like pulling thorns from my skin one by one. But as I wrote, something shifted. The memories that had haunted me for 5 years began to feel less like wounds and more like weapons. Every detail I remembered was a warning I could pass on. Every moment of terror I had survived was proof that survival was possible. I had survived something that should have killed me. And that survival meant something, had to mean something. Part 4. 10 years have passed since I ran through those woods with branches tearing at my skin and terror pounding in my chest. 10 years since I sat in that police station wrapped in a borrowed blanket trying to explain to strangers how close I had come to dying. 10 years since I learned that the man who served me tea had killed more people than some diseases. I am 34 years old now. I have a career, a husband, a small house with a garden that I tend on Sunday mornings. I have a life that looks completely ordinary from the outside, full of grocery lists and work deadlines and arguments about whose turn it is to clean the bathroom. If you met me at a dinner party, you would never guess that I was almost murdered in a plastic-wrapped room in rural Ohio. You would never know that I still sleep with a nightlight because complete darkness makes me feel like I am back in that house waiting for footsteps on the stairs. Trauma does not disappear. It does not heal like a broken bone or fade like a bruise. It becomes part of you, woven into the fabric of who you are, coloring everything you see and do and feel. I have made peace with that. I have learned to carry it without letting it crush me. But I have never forgotten, and I never will. Gerald Francis Whitmore was never caught. Neither was Marcus Dean Holt. The final count, according to the FBI's last report, was 43 confirmed victims spanning 22 years. 43 women who answered an ad or accepted a ride or trusted a friendly stranger and paid for that trust with their lives. 43 that they know about. The real number is almost certainly higher. I think about those women sometimes. Not every day anymore, but often enough. I think about who they were before Gerald found them. Daughters, sisters, mothers, friends. Women with jobs and hobbies and dreams for the future, all of it erased by a man who saw them as nothing more than objects to be used and discarded. There is no lesson in that, no moral, no comforting message about good triumphing over evil or justice being served. Gerald is still out there, or he died peacefully in his sleep without ever facing consequences for what he did. Either way, the universe did not punish him. The system did not stop him. 43 women are dead and the man who killed them walked away free. That is the truth I've had to live with, but here is the other truth, the one I cling to when the darkness gets too heavy. I survived. Against all odds, against every advantage Gerald had, I survived. I am here. I am alive. I am telling this story with my own voice, and no one can take that away from me. There is one more thing I need to tell you. One more detail that I have never shared publicly before, not with the police, not with my therapist, not with anyone except my husband, on the night I finally told him the whole truth. 3 months ago, I received a letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from a small town in Montana I had never heard of. My name and address were typed on a label, not handwritten, giving no clue about who had sent it. I almost threw it away without opening it, assuming it was junk mail or some kind of scam. But something made me hesitate. Some instinct, the same instinct that had saved my life 10 years ago, whispered that I should pay attention. So I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of white paper folded once. The message was brief, typed in the same anonymous font as the address label. No signature, no explanation, just 12 words that turned my blood to ice. I still think about the one who got away. Stay safe, Rachel. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick up my phone to call the police. They came within the hour, took the letter as evidence, dusted it for fingerprints that were not there. They told me it could be a hoax, a sick joke from someone who had followed the case. They told me not to panic, that there was no way to know for certain who had sent it. But I know. Gerald sent that letter. After 10 years of silence, after vanishing so completely that even the FBI could not find him, he reached out to remind me that he was still alive, still watching, still thinking about the woman who escaped his plastic-wrapped room. The letter changed something in me. Not my fear, which has always been there and always will be, but my purpose, my reason for telling this story. I used to think I was sharing my experience to help other people avoid what happened to me. To teach them the warning signs, the red flags, the moments when instinct should override politeness, and that is still true. But now I understand that there is something more. I am telling this story because Gerald wants me to be silent. He wants me to hide, to shrink, to live in fear of what he might do if I draw too much attention. The letter was a warning, a reminder that he knows where I am, that he could find me if he wanted to, but I am done being afraid of him. I am not his victim, I am his witness, and I will keep telling this story, keep spreading this warning, keep shining a light into the darkness where he hides until someone finally stops him. Gerald, if you are listening to this, I want you to know something. You made a mistake letting me go. You made a mistake sending that letter, because every word I speak, every story I share, every person I warn makes your hunting ground a little smaller, makes your victims a little harder to find. Makes your perfect system a little less perfect. You wanted me to be afraid. You wanted me to run and hide and spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Instead, I'm looking directly at you, and I am not blinking. To everyone else listening, I want you to remember something. Evil exists. It walks among us wearing friendly faces and warm smiles. It posts ads on Craigslist and answers phone calls and invites you into houses that look perfectly normal from the outside. But evil can be defeated. Not always by justice, not always by punishment, but by awareness, by vigilance, by the simple act of paying attention when something does not feel right. When something feels wrong, when your gut is screaming at you to get out, when every instinct in your body is telling you that the person in front of you is not what they seem, listen. Do not rationalize. Do not make excuses. Do not worry about being polite or hurting someone's feelings or looking paranoid. Just run. I spent 20 minutes in that house ignoring warning signs that should have sent me sprinting back to my car. The dirty shoes that did not match the pressed shirt, the refrigerator with no food, the bathroom with no soap, the dog that did not exist, the wife who never appeared. Every single one of those details was a red flag, and I explained them all away because I did not want to be rude, because I had been taught my whole life to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume good intentions, to be nice. Being nice almost got me killed. Tell someone where you are going. Every time, without exception. A simple text message, a quick phone call, a note left on your kitchen counter could be the difference between being found and disappearing forever. Trust your judgment about people even when they seem trustworthy, especially when they seem trustworthy. The most effective predators do not look like predators at all. They look like everyone else. They blend in, adapt, present. Whatever face will put their victims at ease. And by the time you see what is underneath the mask, it is already too late. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about a time when you ignored your instincts or trusted someone you should not have, I want to hear about it. Share your experiences in the comments. Tell me about the moments when something felt wrong and you could not explain why. Tell me about the times you listened to that voice and the times you did not. Because we learn from each other's stories. We protect each other by sharing what we know. And the more we talk about these things, the harder it becomes for predators like Gerald to operate in the shadows. And if you know someone who is taking risks, meeting strangers alone, ignoring the warning signs that could save their life, send them this story. Show them what can happen when we let politeness override instinct. It might be the most important thing you ever do for them. My name is Rachel Bennett. I was supposed to die in a plastic-wrapped room in Ohio 10 years ago. I did not. And every single day I am still alive is proof that the monsters do not always win. Stay safe, stay alert, stay alive, and whatever you do, never walk into the house at the end of the gravel road.